There are many different branches off of this that we could explore. Let's maybe back up or zoom out, choose your favorite metaphor. And perhaps you could just, in your, I suppose, framework or worldview, what it means to be a good parent. Could you define this or just speak to that?
Yeah.
And then we can use that as a sort of foundation from which we can launch into a bunch of other stuff.
I should have a really solid answer to that question by now, but
Fortunately, we have a lot of time.
Maybe part of what I struggle with is I think we probably think about that word or that term good parent is like what I'm doing on the surface is something observable. Or I think a core principle that I think about is actually separating kind of who you are in terms of your identity, which is not observable, from what you do in your actions, which usually is observable, separating those two. But I think a good parent probably sees parenting as a journey of self-growth and discovery as much as they see it about anything related to your kid's growth. So I think that's number one. Number two, I think a good parent really activates curiosity over judgment in a situation with their kids. And a good parent probably can put into action the idea that really being the sturdiest leader for your kid involves equal parts very firm boundaries and parental authority as it does kind of warm, validating connection.
You mentioned curiosity over judgment. Now, when people hear this word judgment, they probably assume that is a negative judgment, but a judgment could also be something like good job, right? So what would curiosity look like in place of either a negative or a positive judgment?
I think the words good job have gotten a lot of like press for parents. Like, you're not supposed to say good job. Say good job. It's not going to do damage to your kid. I think there's a lot we can unpack there. There's deeper principles, right? They're like, oh, what do kids really need when they have accomplishments?
Yeah, I like how you zoom out because it's not whether you're using like the crayons or the oil paints or the acrylics or charcoal. You have to learn the fundamentals of like drawing. And to do that, you need to learn how to see things. So it's like returning to those first principles.
That's right.
Right.
That's exactly right. So I think judgment, it can be positive, but I would say in parenting, actually in any relationship, it's just so easy to see someone's behavior that feels bad or feels less than ideal. And we just activate our judgment about the behavior. And usually when you judge behavior, what you're unconsciously doing is you're seeing behavior as a sign of who someone is. That's why you're judging it. This person's such a selfish person, right? My friend didn't call me back. Oh, they're so selfish, right? Or my kid keeps hitting on the playground, even though I say no hitting. And then we don't even realize, we're going to like, what's wrong with my kid? Why do I have such a bad kid? My kid is never going to figure things out. I'm a bad parent. You just see something on the surface and you kind of feel like you know everything about it. I actually think, I've never thought about that. That's really what it means to judge something. I see something that's probably part of a larger story. And instead, I think it's the whole thing. Mm-hmm. To me, the opposite of judgment in any relationship is curiosity. And I think curiosity is when you see something and you just wonder about it. To me, that's like one of the best words for parents. Wonder. I wonder why my kid is hitting. As soon as you use the word wonder, you're unable to judge because you're thinking and kind of conjuring up this bigger picture. Now, where parents usually go when they hear me say that, it's like, oh, so it's just okay, my kid's hitting? And there's this, again, judgment we even do there where—
You must deal with so many people, so many strong opinions.
Well, part of it is I get it. I have so much empathy for parents and even understand their skepticism of our approach because we have had shoved down our throat this very, very behavior first, punishment first. We call it discipline. It's actually a joke to me in any other area of life. If we allowed CEOs and coaches to talk to the people in our organizations like we think parents do to kids, and then we call it disciplined, it would never fly and those people would be fired. But we've had that shoved down our throats. And so anything new always feels uncomfortable. And these are very new ideas, right? But I think about with other areas, even with kids, if your kid isn't learning how to swim, right? You teach them how to swim. And nobody says, oh, you just think it's okay that they're not swimming. It's like a weird, be like, what? I'm just teaching them how to swim.
Could I pause for 1 second?
Yeah.
All right. I have a bunch of thoughts on this good job thing. I know that—
Let's do it.
I like your potential replacements for that. Could you just to give some people a concrete example, like what might you say instead of good job?
A kid comes to us and let's say, I don't know, a young kid brings us a painting and we could say, oh, good job. It's amazing, right? Or let's say an older kid brings us some paper they wrote and they got a good grade. We say, good job. Okay, again, good job does not damage kids. But I think in those moments, we want as parents to kind of double down on building our kids' confidence. That's usually the kind of goal we're optimizing for. So then to me, the question is that like the best of all options, or at least should we have other tools in our toolbox? And the thing that really builds kids' confidence is learning to gaze in before you gaze out. We're in a world that is priming us to gaze out before we gaze in. Kind of like, look what I've done. And can someone in the world tell me I am good enough? That's basically the world we live in. And it makes you very empty and very fragile, very, very anxious.
You're talking about social media?
It's social media. Yeah, everything. I mean, so many things, right? Definitely social media, right? And if I think about this moment, and again, I'm often very long-term thinking, but my kids over and over show me things. What's going to help them down the road? Well, I know when you're in your 20s and 30s, what's really helpful down the road is when you produce something. Maybe it's art, maybe it's a project. Being able to give yourself some estimation of that before others do is very helpful to your whole self-concept and protective of anxiety and depression. I think I did a good job in this project. It's true, I didn't hear back from my boss yet, but I'm a little anxious about what my boss is going to say. But the fact that someone didn't tell me something isn't going to spiral me. And I think about the yearning and the searching and the desperation for a good job. Well, if every time my kid produces something, again, what they wire next to that is someone telling them good job, then they go into the world unable to give themselves that type of validation and searching for someone to say they're good enough. So what do I like better? Anything that helps your kid share more about themselves actually ends up feeling better to your kid also. So I think about, a little while ago, my daughter paints stuff, and she gave me this painting, and I'm a horrible artist, so anything she does is amazing. But what I said to her first, I said, tell me about the painting. Like, what made you pick red there? She told me this whole story about how she hasn't ever really seen a red police car and whatever it was. She shared her story with me. Same thing, I'm thinking about a kid giving us a paper. Oh, how do you think it'd come up with that topic? Oh, what made you start it that way? Oh, what was it like writing that? Whatever the questions are. And I know it sounds like annoying at first. I get it. Like as a parent, you're like, oh, really? Can I just say good job? And of course you can. But then again, I go to an adult example. Like let's say, Tim, you redid your house, okay, and I visited and you really worked hard on it. And I came and I go, oh, I love your house. Good job. It's actually kind of a conversation ender. I feel like you'd say to me, thank you.
Yeah.
But if instead I said, oh, how did you pick that color wall with that couch? You would, okay. Well, let me tell you and let me show you my Pinterest board or whatever it was. And even if I never said good job, I bet you would feel more lit up inside and almost better than if I had just kind of ended the conversation that way.
Yeah, for sure. I have a number of friends. I mean, I have a lot of friends with kids, but one who comes to mind, I'm not going to name him, but he's very good at this. And one of the best learners of any skill I've ever met. He's just an incredible human. The other thing that he did, and this was even prior to books like Grit, I think that's Angela Duckworth, but instead of saying good job, another thing he would do is say something, I'm making this up as an example, but he would be like, I'm so proud of you. You worked so hard on that, right? To sort of reinforce the effort, the process over the outcome.
That's right.
Which seems to make sense, right? And you're not suggesting your path is the one only toolkit of purity and redemption in the sense that it can combine with other things. But first principles are adaptable, right? As long as you understand what those principles are.
Yeah, I think that like every parent, I feel like some percentage of the time, would be like, great job. That's cool. That's awesome. Okay. But those questions, process over product, like asking for a kid's story, asking them to tell you, once you get started, it's easier. And yes, it actually focuses on what's more in a kid's control, right? And then setting up your kids to feel good about themselves, even if they're not always getting 100, is just such a massive privilege. And it actually makes them work harder because they're focused on their effort and process instead of just on a result.